Note to you, dear reader. There are moments in life when we witness something so unexpected, so contrary to everything we've been taught to believe, that it stops us cold. I've lived long enough to know that real love rarely arrives in the package we expect. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or follow the rules society sets. Sometimes it shows up mud-splattered and rough around the edges, choosing what others have dismissed. This story, set in the Colorado Territory of 1884, is about such a moment. It's about a woman who'd been brought west as an afterthought, a mistake even, and a man who saw something everyone else missed. In our modern world of quick judgments and surface beauty, perhaps we need reminders that worth isn't measured by a scale or a mirror. Sometimes the most profound connections happen when someone simply says, "You'll do," and means it as the highest compliment they know how to give. The 10th woman wasn't supposed to be there at all. Clara Hartley stood at the far end of the mercantile hall, her back pressed against the wall, as if she could disappear into the pine boards. 9 women clustered near the windows, their bustled skirts rustling like anxious birds, their voices pitched high with nervous laughter. The afternoon sun caught their carefully pinned hair golden, auburn, chestnut, each one shining like they'd been polished for display. "Ladies, ladies," Mrs. Whitmore clapped her hands, her voice sharp as winter wind. "Pee! The gentleman will arrive within the hour. Remember what we discussed: posture, grace, and pleasant countenances." The marriage broker's eyes skimmed over the 9, then stopped at Clara. Her mouth tightened. The same expression she'd worn since Clara had stepped off the Union Pacific that morning. The telegram from the agency must have mentioned 9 brides, not 10, and certainly not one who took up the space of 2. Clara had heard the whispers on the platform. Mistake. Error. What were they thinking? Miss Hartley. Mrs. Whitmore's voice could have frozen July. "Perhaps you might assist with the refreshments in the back room." Before Clara could move, the door burst open, not opened burst, as if the man behind it had never learned to enter a room any other way. The 9 women gasped in unison, a sound like silk tearing. He filled the doorway completely, 6 feet and 4 inches of mountain-hardened muscle, clothes that had seen better decades, and mud. Lord, the mud caked on boots that looked like they'd walked here straight from creation. His beard hadn't seen a razor in days, maybe weeks. Dark hair hung past his collar, and his hands, Clara noticed hands, always had, were scarred and massive, the kind that could snap a neck or gentle a spooked horse with equal ease. Mrs. Whitmore recovered first. "Mr. Brennan, you're early?" Her voice climbed an octave. "The viewing isn't for another hour. Got business at the mill after." His voice rumbled like distant thunder, the words sparse as if each one cost him. His eyes, gray as morning fog, swept the room once. The 9 women straightened, preening despite their shock, or perhaps because of it. Here was danger, the kind that made hearts race for all sorts of reasons. "Well," Mrs. Whitmore smoothed her skirts, trying to reclaim control. "Since you're here, might I present—" "No need." He walked into the room, and Clara felt the floor vibrate under his weight. The 9 women parted like the Red Sea, some stepping back in fear, others leaning forward in fascination. He passed the first, a petite blonde with dimples, past the second, a redhead with a waist that could fit in his 2 hands, past them all, his boots leaving mud tracks on the swept floor, until he stood directly in front of Clara. She forgot to breathe. Up close. She could smell him leather and wood smoke and something wild, like pine sap and cold mountain air. He studied her with those fog-gray eyes, taking in her too-tight dress, the only one that had fit from the company's trunk, her work-worn hands, the way she didn't flutter or giggle or faint. "You!" The single word dropped between them like a stone in still water. Mrs. Whitmore's laugh came out strangled. "Mr. Brennan, surely you'd prefer to see all our ladies. Miss Pemberton there speaks French. Miss Donnelly plays piano. This one." The room went silent as a held breath. Clara found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "Why?" For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not a smile she doubted, this man smiled often, but a softening around his eyes. "You're not pretending to be something you're not." He looked at the others, their poses carefully arranged, hands positioned just so, faces fixed in practiced expressions of demure interest. Then back to Clara. "Don't have time for pretending. Mr. Brennan." Mrs. Whitmore tried again, desperation creeping in. "Miss Hartley that is, she's not. The agency sent her by mistake. She's merely here to—" "She's staying." The question was directed at Clara, not Mrs. Whitmore. Clara felt the weight of it, the weight of 10 pairs of eyes, the weight of every snicker she'd heard since stepping off that train. She thought of the letter in her pocket, her sister's words. "Go west?" "Clara, start over. What else is there? I paid my passage." Her chin lifted. "I'm staying." "Then she'll do." Mrs. Whitmore made a sound like a tea kettle about to explode. "Mr. Brennan, you don't understand. The other gentlemen will be expecting. That is, Miss Hartley's presence might give the wrong impression about our establishment standards." Josiah. Brennan turned to look at the marriage broker, and Clara saw why animals went still when predators appeared. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Mrs. Whitmore's words died in her throat. "Papers," he said simply. But the viewing. Papers. Now." As Mrs. Whitmore scurried to her desk, the 9 brides clustered together, whispering furiously. Clara caught fragments. "Mountain man. Lives alone. Nobody's seen his place. They say he killed a bear with his hands." "You don't have to do this," Clara found herself saying. "I know what this is. Charity. Pity. I don't need—" "Stop talking," she blinked. He leaned closer, close enough that she could see old flecks in the gray of his eyes. "Been watching since you got off that train. You helped 3 women with their trunks. Didn't complain when that driver overcharged you. Didn't cry when Mrs. Whitmore tried to hide you in the back. You got steel in you." He straightened. "Don't need pretty. Need strong." Mrs. Whitmore returned with the marriage contract, her hands shaking. "Mr. Brennan, please reconsider. Your reputation. The town will talk." They always do. He signed his name in bold strokes, then held the pen out to Clara. The room held its breath. This was madness. She didn't know this man, this mountain of barely civilized humanity. He could be cruel, could be mad, could be worse than anything waiting for her back east. But when she looked at him, she saw something in his eyes that made her hand move toward the pen. Not pity, not charity, recognition. As if he saw past the flesh everyone else couldn't stop staring at, straight through to something essential. She signed her name. "Get your things," he said. "We leave in 10 minutes." As he walked out, leaving shocked silence in his wake, Clara realized she didn't even know his first name. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Clara's carpetbag sat where she'd left it, tucked behind the coat rack, like something shameful. The other women's trunks lined the wall, proper trunks with brass corners and their initials painted in gold. Her bag's handle had been mended twice with twine. "You can't be serious." Miss Pemberton, the blonde with dimples, blocked her path. "That man, he's not even civilized. Look at his boots. Look at it. Excuse me." Clara stepped around her. The bag felt heavier than it had this morning. Or maybe her arms were shaking. She couldn't tell. Through the window, she saw him loading supplies into a wagon. A Studebaker, the paint worn down to bare wood in places. 2 mules stood patient in the traces, their breath visible in the cool May afternoon. He moved with economy, each motion deliberate, a sack of flour here, a crate there, building something, planning. Mrs. Whitmore appeared at her elbow, voice low and urgent. "There's still time to reconsider. Mr. Dalton will arrive soon. He's a shopkeeper, very respectable. I could explain you've changed your mind." "No. Miss Hartley, you don't understand what you're agreeing to. That man lives 15 miles into the mountains. The nearest neighbor is 7 miles away. In winter, I said no." Clara pushed through the door. The afternoon air hit her face, sharp with the smell of pine and horse manure. 3 women stood across the street, their mouths moving behind gloved hands. A boy had stopped rolling his hoop to stare. Even the dogs seemed to pause their scratching to watch. Josiah didn't look up from checking the harness. "That all you got?" "Yes." He took the bag from her hand, set it in the wagon bed next to a barrel of salt pork. His fingers brushed hers, calloused, warm, quick. Then he walked to the other side of the wagon and waited. Clara stared at the wheel, higher than she'd expected. Her corset bit into her ribs, the stays too tight for climbing. She reached for the sideboard, tried to find a foothold. His hand settled on her waist, not grabbing, just there, steady as fence posts. "Step up." She did. He lifted, not hauled, lifted, and she was on the bench. Simple as that. Her face burned, but not from embarrassment, from the memory of his hands spanning her waist completely, fingers nearly touching. He swung up beside her, the wagon tilting under his weight, took the reins. The mules started forward without command. They were 3 blocks from the mercantile when Clara saw it, tucked between the flour and the salt pork. Another bag, new leather, shop fresh, a woman's traveling bag. The new leather bag sat between them like an accusation. Clara's throat closed around the question. She gripped the bench's edge, splinters biting through her gloves. Cedar Ridge fell away behind them, the bank, the church, the school where children pressed their faces against windows. A woman yanked her son back from the street. The boy's mouth formed words Clara had heard before. "Fat lady." Josiah's jaw muscle twitched. Nothing else. The mules kept their steady pace. The road turned toward the mountains. Behind them, boot steps, running. Clara twisted to look Mrs. Whitmore, skirts hiked up, waving a paper. "Mr. Brennan, you forgot the marriage certificate requires witnesses." He pulled the reins. The wagon creaked to a stop. Mrs. Whitmore arrived panting, her corset clearly too tight for running. She thrust the paper at him. "2 witnesses. It's the law." Had Josiah looked at the empty road ahead, then back at the town? A crowd had gathered outside the mercantile, watching, waiting for the show. "Henley," he called to a man leaning against the barber shop. "You'll sign." The barber straightened, looked at the crowd, then ambled over. Took the pen from Mrs. Whitmore, signed his name. "Need another," she said. Josiah's eyes found the blacksmith's apprentice. Boy, the apprentice couldn't be more than 16, nearly tripped over his feet getting there. His hand shook as he signed. The ink splattered. "There." Josiah handed the paper back. "Legal now." Mrs. Whitmore opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Brennan? Surely you'll want the ceremony." The reins snapped. The mules moved. Mrs. Whitmore had to jump back to avoid the wheels. They rode in silence past the last houses, past the cemetery with its crooked wooden crosses, past the mine road where men stopped hauling ore to stare. The new leather bag shifted with each bump. Clara forced her eyes forward. The road narrowed. Pine trees closed in on both sides, their shadows turning the air cold. The wagon wheels found ruts carved by spring runoff. Clara's teeth clicked together with each jolt. "Hold on!" His first words in 20 minutes. Clara grabbed the bench as the wagon lurched over a fallen branch. The new bag slid against her hip. Definitely women's things inside. She heard the soft sound of fabric. They climbed steadily. The air thinned, sharpened with the scent of sap and snow melt. A hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing off invisible cliff faces. The mules' breathing deepened, steam puffing from their nostrils. Josiah reached behind the seat, pulled out a canteen, handed it to her without looking. The water tasted of metal and mint. He'd dropped wintergreen leaves inside. Clara hadn't realized her throat was dry until the coolness hit. She drank carefully, aware of his presence beside her, the heat radiating from his body despite the mountain chill. "Thank you," he grunted. Might have been acknowledgement, might have been the wagon hitting another rut. An hour in, maybe more, hard to tell with the sun hidden behind peaks. He pulled something from his coat, wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the bench between them. "Eat." Clara unwrapped it. Pemmican, dark meat mixed with fat and dried berries, pressed into a brick. She'd read about it in the newspapers back east. Trappers' food, Indian food, survival food. She bit off a piece, tough as leather, tastes like concentrated winter. Ugh. But her stomach had been empty since the toast at dawn, and the fat melted on her tongue, rich and necessary. "Good," she said. That earned her a glance. Quick, assessing, then back to the road. They passed through a meadow where deer raised their heads from grazing, past a stream running fast and clear over colored stones. The wagon ford splashed ice-cold water on Clara's boots. She didn't complain. "Stop." Clara froze. Josiah's hand moved to the rifle propped against his knee. His head turned slowly, scanning the tree line. A mountain cat sat on a boulder 50 feet away, tawny coat, eyes like yellow glass, watching them. Clara's heart hammered against her corset stays. Josiah made a sound, not quite whistle, not quite hum, low, steady. The cat's tail twitched, once, twice, then it stood, stretched like a house cat waking from a nap, and padded into the forest. "Won't bother us," he said, setting the rifle back. "Just curious." Clara realized she'd been holding her breath, released it slow, trying to hide the shake. Another hour. The road barely deserved the name now, just 2 tracks through grass and stone. The wagon tilted at angles that made Clara's stomach lurch. She pressed her boots against the footboard, leaned into the turns. There! She looked where he pointed. Through a gap in the pines, a cabin, log walls, chinked with white lime mortar. Maybe shake roof, stone chimney, already trickling smoke. Someone was there. Someone was waiting. As they got closer, Clara saw the addition, fresh yellow wood against the weathered gray of the original structure. Windows on both sides, real glass, not oiled paper. A door between old and new, creating separate spaces. 2 spaces, 2 rooms, like the 2 bags. The 2 cups she'd glimpsed in his supplies, 2 of everything. The mules stopped without command, knowing they were home. Josiah climbed down, walked around to her side, held up his hands. This time she didn't hesitate. Placed her hands on his shoulders, let him lift her down. Her feet touched ground, But he didn't let go immediately. A heartbeat. 2. His thumbs pressed against her ribs through the wool dress. Then he stepped back, started unhitching the mules. Clara stood in the yard, packed dirt, swept clean, staring at the cabin, smoke definitely coming from the chimney. The door to the old section stood slightly open. A shadow moved inside. Josiah. He looked up from the harness buckles. "Who's in your cabin?" His hands never paused in their work. "My wife." The new leather bag. 2 rooms, 2 of everything. Clara's knees locked to keep from falling. "Your what?" Clara's legs wouldn't hold. The ground tilted. Her hand found the wagon wheel, rough wood under her palm. "Your wife." The words came out strangled. Josiah straightened from the harness, the leather strap still in his hand. Those gray eyes studied her face. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite amusement, but something close. "You signed the papers." He pointed at the shadow moving in the cabin. "That's the dog." Heat flooded Clara's face. Through the open door, a massive gray shape appeared, part wolf, part something else. Yellow eyes examined her with the same intense quiet as its master. "Dog," she repeated. Her laugh came out shaky. "Of course." The animal padded over, circled her once, twice. Its head reached her waist. Josiah made that low sound again, the same one he'd used with the mountain cat. The dog sat, still watching her. "Blue." Josiah went back to the mules. "He's particular about people." Blue sniffed her skirt, her carpet bag, where Josiah had set it in the dirt. Then decision made. The dog walked back to the cabin and flopped across the threshold. Clara helped unload. Her arms shook from the weight of the flour sacks. But she didn't stop. The new leather bag, she couldn't look at it. Josiah carried it to the fresh-built addition, her addition, and set it inside, without comment. The main cabin was 1 room. Bed in the corner narrow, meant for 1. Cast-iron stove. Table. 2 chairs he must have just built. Shelves lined with preserves, dried meat, sacks of beans. Everything neat, ordered, purposeful. A rifle above the door, another by the bed, maps tacked to the wall. Survey maps, property lines, water sources marked in pencil. "You'll sleep there." He pointed to the addition. "Built it last month." Last month. Before he knew she existed, before the marriage broker sent for brides, he'd been planning for someone, anyone, just not alone anymore. Through the connecting door, Clara saw her space. A bed with fresh ticking, still smelling of pine shavings, a washstand, hooks for clothes. The leather bag sat on a chair. She'd open it later, when her hands stopped shaking, when she could think about what it meant that he'd bought women's things before meeting her. Hungry? She nodded. Her stomach had been grinding on itself since the pemmican. He pulled down a skillet, black as night from years of seasoning, set it on the stove, added wood to the firebox. While it heated, he opened a crock of bear fat. The smell filled the cabin, wild, rich, nothing like the lard she knew. "Watch!" He cut thick slices from a slab of bacon, laid them in the hot fat. They sizzled, edges curling. Added potatoes, already boiled and cooled, sliced thin, salt from a wooden box, pepper, something green from a jar, wild onions. She realized, tomorrow, you do it. Clara studied each movement, the angle of his wrist when he flipped the potatoes, how he tilted the pan to pool the grease, when he moved the skillet to the cooler part of the stove. They ate in silence. Full dark outside now, only the fire's glow and one oil lamp. Blue gnawed a bone in the corner. The bacon was perfect crisp but not burned. The potatoes had absorbed the fat, turned golden at the edges. She cleaned her plate with a piece of bread he'd pulled from somewhere, hard as a rock, until she soaked it in the grease. Good, she said. He nodded, stood, took both plates to a bucket by the door. Dawn comes early. Sleep. That was all. He banked the fire, turned down the lamp. Clara stood uncertain in the doorway to her room. Should she say good night? Thank him. Ask why he'd chosen to live so far from any human voice? But he was already pulling off his boots, movements efficient in the near dark. She went to her room, closed the door soft behind her. The leather bag waited. Inside, 2 wool dresses, practical brown and gray, undergarments cotton, not silk, but new. Soap wrapped in paper, a hairbrush, wool stockings, a winter coat that would actually fit her, everything in her size. How had he known? How had he guessed right at the bottom, wrapped in muslin, a book, Mrs. Beaton's Book of Household Management? The binding was worn, pages marked with slips of paper, someone else's notes in the margins, feminine handwriting, faded brown. She held it to the lamplight. On the inside cover, Margaret Brennan, 8. His mother's book, his mother's notes. Saved all these years. Clara set it on the washstand, changed into her nightdress, her own, thin from too many washings. The new bed was firm, the quilts heavy. Through the wall, she heard him moving, settling, then nothing. She lay awake listening to the night. Wind in the pines, something scurrying on the roof squirrel. Maybe. Blue's occasional snore. And underneath it all, the presence of the man on the other side of the wall, her husband, according to the law, stranger, according to everything else. Dawn came like a slap. Up! Josiah's voice through the door. Clara's eyes felt gummed shut. Gray light leaked through the window. Couldn't be past 5. She dressed quick, fingers fumbling with buttons. Stepped into the main room to find him already dressed. Fire built up, coffee brewing in a blue enamel pot. Here! He handed her a cup, black, bitter, strong enough to strip paint. It scalded her tongue, shocked her awake. Today, you learn. They started with the fire, banking it at night to save coals, building it up come morning, which wood burned hot, which lasted long. How to read the smoke, white meant green wood, black meant too much pitch, the damper positions for baking versus boiling, then water. The well was 50 feet from the cabin. The bucket was heavy. She needed both hands. He showed her how to check for ice, how to prime the pump when it froze, where to dump wash water so it wouldn't draw animals. Always carry the rifle when you come out here alone. I don't know how to shoot. You'll learn. Breakfast? She burned the bacon. The potatoes stuck to the pan. The coffee boiled over and doused the fire. Josiah ate it all without comment, then showed her again, slower. The exact amount of fat. The heat tells in the metal when it shimmers, when it smokes. Her second attempt was better. Edible, at least. After breakfast, the animals. 2 mules, a milk cow, 6 chickens in a pen reinforced with wire. The cow was dry, would freshen in the fall. He said, the chickens gave 3 eggs between them. She collected them, still warm, while the hens pecked her wrists bloody. They'll get used to you. Blood dripped on her dress. He took her hand, turned it to see the damage. His thumb pressed below the wounds, calluses rough against her skin. Then he let go, went to a shelf, came back with a tin of Salve, calendula, and camphor. From the smell, keep it clean. Infection kills out here. Mid-morning, the garden, half an acre, fenced against deer, potatoes, beans, squash, carrots, and turnips for cold storage. He showed her which were weeds, which were food, how to check for bugs, for blight. The soil was rocky, everything fought to grow. You'll tend this while I'm at the mill. The mill, 3 days a week, sometimes 4, pays cash money. She'd be alone with the dog, the cow, the chickens, the mountain. Miles from another voice, lunch was cold bacon on bread. They ate standing at the counter. Her back ached from bending in the garden. Her hands were raw from the pump handle. Sweat had soaked through her dress despite the cool air. Afternoon, the root cellar, carved into the hillside behind the cabin, reinforced with stones, dark, cold, smelling of earth and dampness, potatoes in bins, carrots in sand, turnips and cabbages hanging from the rafters, preserves on shelves, some his, some clearly older, dust-covered. Count everything, know what you have. She counted, wrote it in the margins of an old newspaper with a stub of pencil. 40 pounds of potatoes, 20 of carrots, 15 jars of preserves, peaches, tomatoes, green beans. Not enough for a full winter, but close than the smokehouse. Smaller, set away from the cabin, hams hanging from hooks, strips of venison, dried hard as leather. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger despite lunch. Bear. He nodded. Last month, 1 ham is traded for. Rest is ours. Late afternoon, he set the rifle in her hands. Henry repeating rifle, the metal cold and heavier than she expected. Safety here. His hand covered hers, guided her finger to the catch. Always on until you're ready to shoot. He stood behind her, arms around her to position the rifle. She could smell in wood smoke, bear grease, something essentially male. His chest pressed against her back. His breath stirred her hair. Stock tight to your shoulder, sight down the barrel, both eyes open. She tried to focus on the target, a piece of red cloth tacked to a tree. Her arms shook. The rifle wavered. Breathe. In. She inhaled. Hold. The world stilled. Squeeze. Don't pull. The shot cracked through the valley. The rifle kicked into her shoulder, sent her stumbling back into him. His arm came around her waist, steadied her. The red cloth was untouched, but bark had exploded from the tree 2 feet to the left. Again. 20 shots. Her shoulder would be bruised tomorrow. By the last one, she hit the cloth, barely just nicked the edge. But Josiah nodded. Better. As the sun dropped behind the western peaks, they sat on the cabin steps. She was tired in places she didn't know could be tired. Her dress was filthy. Her hair had come undone hours ago, but she'd made dinner beans and bacon, cornbread that only burned on the bottom, and he'd eaten it. Progress. Blue lay between them, his great head on his paws. The evening air was cooling fast, carrying the scent of pine and the last patches of snow on the high peaks. Somewhere in the distance, an elk bugled. Why? She asked, the question she'd been swallowing all day. Why did you pick me? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual, rough. Been alone 7 years? Since the war? The war, that explained the scars, the way he moved always checking exits, keeping his back to walls. Tried town living, couldn't stomach it, everyone wanting you to be what you were before, but before was dead. So I came here. He pulled out a pipe, packed it with tobacco. The match flare lit his face for a moment, older than she'd thought, lines around his eyes, gray threading through the dark hair. Last winter was bad. January, got caught in a whiteout, made it back, but barely. Lay here 3 days, fever burning me up. Nobody would have found me till spring. The pipe smoke drifted between them, sweet and sharp. Decided if I made it, I'd find a wife, someone strong enough for this life. Went to town last month, told Mrs. Whitmore to send for brides. Yeah, but you didn't know who would come. No. He turned to look at her, in the fading light. His eyes were almost black. Didn't expect you. Because I'm... She gestured at herself. No, sharper. Because you're not broken. Clara's throat closed. I don't understand. Every woman on that platform was running from something. Could see it in how they held themselves, scared or desperate or mean with disappointment. But you... He took another pull on the pipe. You were just there. Solid. Like you'd already survived whatever tried to break you. He stood, knocked the pipe empty against the step. Storm coming tomorrow. Maybe tonight. I can smell it. Clara looked at the clear sky. Stars just beginning to show. No clouds anywhere. How can you tell? You'll learn. He headed for the door, then stopped. That book in your room was my mother's. I saw. She was a good woman, he'd strong. Raised 6 boys after my father died. Kept us fed. Kept us together. Would have liked you. He went inside. Clara stayed on the step. Blue's warmth against her leg, watching stars emerge one by one, her shoulder throbbed from the rifle. Her hands were raw. Tomorrow would bring more of the same, more lessons, more failures, more small victories. Inside, she heard him moving around, preparing for bed. Her husband, this stranger who saw something in her nobody else had bothered to look for. Blue suddenly lifted his head, ears forward, a low growl in his throat. He stood, hackles raised, staring into the darkness beyond the cabin. Something was out there. The air tasted wrong. Clara stood in the doorway, coffee cup warm in her hands, watching Josiah study the western horizon. 3 weeks she'd been here. 3 weeks of learning his rhythms up before dawn, coffee black, 2 eggs fried hard. 3 weeks of watching him read the mountain's moods like scripture. This morning, his shoulders were tight. Stormy, she asked. He nodded, still watching the sky. Clear blue, not a cloud visible, but the birds had gone quiet. Even the chickens clustered in their coop's corner. Feathers ruffled. How long tonight, maybe sooner. He turned, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. Need to prepare. They worked without discussion. Clara had learned this about him when work needed doing. Words were waste. She followed his lead, matching his urgency without understanding its source. First, the animals. The cow went into the barn easy enough, but the mules balked. Josiah spoke low to them, that rumbling tone she'd heard him use with Blue, until they settled. The chickens required herding with a long stick, Clara driving them while Josiah secured extra boards across their coop's openings. Higher, he said, pointing to a gap near the roof. Wind'll find any weakness. She held the board while he hammered. His sleeve pulled back with each swing, revealing a puckered scar that ran from wrist to elbow. Not a clean war wound, something torn, healed badly. Next, the windows. They had glass, a luxury she hadn't expected, but Josiah pulled shutters closed over each one, barring them with heavy beams. The cabin darkened to twilight despite the noon sun. Fill everything that holds water. He handed her buckets, pots, even the wash basin. Well, might be fouled after. 20 trips to the well. Her shoulders burned, sweat soaked through her dress, despite the day's strange coolness. On the 15th trip, she noticed him favoring his left side. The way he rolled his shoulder between loads, jaw tight, old wound. He glanced at her, kept working. Shrapnel, acts up when weather changes. I have liniment, my mother's recipe. Later, always later with him, never now. When something might be admitted, might be shared. They hauled wood until the stack inside reached the ceiling. Her hands, already rough from 3 weeks' work, split and bled. He noticed, wordlessly handed her his work gloves. Too big, but they helped. By 4 o'clock, The air had thickened to soup. Clara's lungs worked harder for each breath. The mountains had disappeared behind a wall of black that seemed to pulse with internal lightning. No thunder yet, just the flashes, silent and wrong. Inside, at Josiah's hand on her elbow. Firm. Now! The first wind hit as they crossed the threshold. Not gradual, a fist that slammed the door shut behind them, rattled the windows in their frames. Clara had been through storms in Pennsylvania. Thunderstorms that shook the house, made the children cry. This was different. The wind didn't gust, it pressed, constant and growing, like something trying to squeeze the cabin flat. The logs groaned, dust sifted from between the chinking. Josiah lit the lamps, checked the fire. His movements were steady, but she saw his eyes track each creak, each shift in the cabin's bones. "How bad?" she asked. "We'll manage." The rain started as darkness fell, though with the shutters barred. Dark had come hours ago. Not drops, but sheets of water that hit the roof like gravel. The sound filled everything, made talking impossible without shouting. Clara busied herself with supper. Beans and salt pork, cornbread if the stove would cooperate. The familiar work helped steady her hands. She was reaching for the flour when the world went white. Lightning strike, close. The crack of thunder came instantly, shook dishes off shelves. Clara found herself on the floor, ears ringing. Josiah pulled her up, hands checking for injury. His mouth moved, but she couldn't hear over the ringing. He pressed his palm to her cheek, turned her head side to side, looking for blood. She realized. She shook her head. "I'm all right." He didn't look convinced, but let her go. The storm settled into rhythm then, lightning every few seconds, thunder rolling continuous. The wind found harmonics in the cabin's construction, making the walls sing a low, threatening note that crawled up Clara's spine. They ate, standing at the counter, beans barely warm. The stove wouldn't draw right with the wind forcing itself down the chimney. "First storm here?" she asked. "First bad one." He set down his plate. "Cabin solid. Built it to last. But roof's only as good as its weakest shingle." As if in answer, something crashed above them. Both looked up. Water appeared on the ceiling, a dark stain spreading. "Not the main roof," Josiah said quickly. "Your room?" Her room. The addition. Built quick, built recent, built hopeful. They moved her things again, the trunk, the bed he'd dragged back after repairs, the few dresses she'd acquired. Water streamed steadily now, pooling on the floor. She positioned pots, buckets, anything to catch it. "Should have done better," Josiah muttered, glaring at his failing work. "You did fine." Clara emptied a pot already full, poured it into a larger bucket. "You built it for someone not even here yet." He looked at her strange then, opened his mouth, closed it. The wind shrieked higher, ending whatever he might have said. Back in the main room, they sat by the stove. The heat helped against the storm's chill temperature, had dropped 20 degrees since morning. Clara pulled out her mending. Josiah cleaned his rifle, though it didn't need it. "Why here?" she asked. "Why build so far from everything?" He was quiet long enough she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, she had to lean close to hear over the storm. "Got tired of pretending." "Pretending what?" "That I came back whole." He set down the rifle. "War ended. Everyone wanted their boys back. Same as before. But before was dead. Blown apart at Gettysburg, bled out at Antietam. What came home was something else." The lamp flame flickered as the wind forced through invisible gaps. "Town was worse than battle sometimes. Everyone watching, waiting for you to be who you were. Couldn't do it. So I can hear." He gestured at the storm-wrapped cabin. "Mountains don't care who you were." Clara set down her mending. Is that why you wanted a wife? Got tired of being alone with who you are now? His gray eyes found hers. Got tired of being alone. Period. Thunder crashed, immediate and deafening. The barred, secure door blew open. Wind and rain erupted into the cabin, dousing one lamp, sending papers flying. Josiah lunged for the door. The wind fought him, tried to tear it from his hands. Clara grabbed the other side, both of them pulling against the storm's fury. His shoulder hit hers as they fought. She felt him grunt in pain, the old wound. Together, they forced it closed. Josiah slammed the bar back in place, added a chair wedged under the handle for good measure. They stood, breathing hard, soaked from just those few seconds. Water ran down Clara's face, dripped from Josiah's beard. Their eyes met, and suddenly, absurdly, Clara laughed. "What?" He stared at her. "We look like drowned rats." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Speak for yourself." She laughed harder, sir. Maybe hysteria from the storm, the danger, but also something else. The two of them against the wind. Winning? "Here!" She went to her trunk, pulled out a towel, reached up to dry his face. He went still, her hands on his face, feeling the wet beard, the strong bones beneath. His hands came up, covered hers, not moving them away, just holding. Lightning flashed through the shutter's gaps. In that white instant, she saw his eyes clear, saw him seeing her. Not the fat girl from the train platform, not the mistake, her. Thunder followed, shaking them apart. "I'll make that liniment," she said, voice unsteady. "For your shoulder." She mixed it on the stove, cayenne, ginger, willow bark. In the bear grease he showed her. The smell was sharp, medicinal. When she turned back, he'd taken his shirt off. The scars were worse than she'd imagined. A map of violence across his chest and back. The shoulder wound was angry red, probably had been for years. "Sit!" He sat. She stood behind him, worked the warm liniment into the damaged muscle. His skin was hot, tense under her fingers. She found the knots of scar tissue, pressed, careful, but firm. He never made a sound, but his breathing changed deeper, slower, better, yes. His hand came up, caught hers where it rested on his shoulder. His thumb traced her palm, rough calluses on rough skin, working hands, both of them now. "Clara," a crack like the world splitting. The big pine by the barn she'd known, it was the pine even before looking, the one that gave shade in afternoon, that the chickens roosted under. It fell in stages, visible through the shutter gaps in lightning-illuminated moments, toward the cabin, toward them. The impact shook the entire structure. The roof beam above them cracked, sagged, started to splinter. Blue's growl deepened, vibrating through the wooden step into Clara's bones. The darkness beyond the cabin was absolute, no moon yet, just stars and the faint glow from the window behind her. Josiah's hand appeared in her peripheral vision, holding the rifle. "Take it!" She stood, gripped the cold metal. He moved past her, silent despite his size, another rifle materializing in his hands from somewhere. Blue stayed frozen, every muscle taut. "What is it?" Clara whispered. "Bear, maybe, or cat." His voice was calm, like discussing weather. "Light the lantern by the door. Slow." Clara backed toward the cabin, rifle heavy in her arms. The lantern hung from a nail. She'd seen it but hadn't registered it. Matches in a tin box beside it. Her fingers shook as she struck one. The wick caught. Yellow light spilling across the yard. Eyes reflected back, green gold, in pairs. Low to the ground. "Wolves." Josiah lowered his rifle slightly. "Just passing through." 3 shapes materialized at the edge of the light. Gray bodies, lean from winter. They watched the cabin, heads low, considering. Blue stood rigid beside Josiah, a rumble constant in his chest. Will they? No, not with 3 of us here. The largest wolf took a step forward. Josiah raised his rifle to his shoulder, not aiming, just ready. The wolf stopped. They stood frozen, all of them, for a dozen heartbeats. Then the leader turned, melted back into the dark. The others followed. Blue's growl faded to a grumble, then silence. He sat, but his ears stayed pricked forward. Good dog! Josiah's hand dropped to Blue's head. Inside now! Clara's legs felt weak as she followed them in. Josiah barred the door, a heavy beam she hadn't noticed before, fitting into brackets. Do they come often? Once, twice a winter. Till spring, they're moving back to high country. He hung his rifle by the door to you. Storm will drive them lower tomorrow, looking for easy prey. Clara set her rifle carefully on the table. Her hands were steady now, but her heart still raced. You did good, stayed calm. Heat spread through her chest. She turned away, busying herself with the lantern. Bed now. Tomorrow will be work. The wind woke her before dawn. Not a gentle breeze, a living thing that shook the walls, whistled through invisible gaps. Clara dressed quick in the gray wool dress from the leather bag. It fit perfect, warm and practical. Josiah was already up. Had been for some time, judging by what he'd accomplished. The windows were shuttered, extra wood stacked by the stove, water buckets filled and lined against the wall. Eat fast. Need to secure the animals. Breakfast was cold cornbread and bacon. Coffee so strong it made her eyes water. Outside, the wind was picking up, pushing clouds in from the west, dark clouds heavy with moisture. The chickens were agitated, running in circles. Josiah showed her how to herd them into the reinforced part of their coop, close the extra barriers. The cow went into the small barn, more of a shed. Really, but solid. The mules were already inside, smart enough to sense what was coming. Now the wood. They worked side by side, hauling split logs from the pile to the cabin. Her back screamed after the 5th armload. She ignored it. Josiah never slowed, so neither did she. The wind tried to tear the wood from her arms, sent her stumbling. His hand shot out, steadied her, then back to work. By noon, the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. The first snowflakes came sideways, hard as sand against her face. They'd moved everything that could blow away inside or tied it down, checked the shutters twice, filled every container with water. Inside! The door slammed behind them. Just as the real wind hit, the whole cabin shuddered. Clara had never heard anything like it, a roar that didn't stop, didn't pause for breath. The shutters rattled like something was trying to tear them off. Josiah added wood to the stove, building the fire higher than she'd seen before. Strip wet clothes. You'll freeze. Her dress was soaked through with snow. She went to her room, changed into the brown wool. When she came back, he'd done the same, dry pants, fresh shirt. He handed her a cup of coffee, pointed to the chair by the stove. How long had she asked? Day. Maybe 2 days, trapped in this cabin with this man she'd known less than a week. They worked at indoor tasks. She mended a tear in his shirt while he oiled harness leather. The wind screamed around the corners, found every tiny gap to whistle through. Snow built up against the shutters, darkening the room even though it was barely past noon. Your shoulder. She'd noticed him rotating it, the slight grimace when he thought she wasn't looking. Old wound. I have liniment, my mother's recipe. He looked at her, that steady gray gaze. What's in it? Cayenne, ginger, willow bark, in bear grease, if you have it. Got the herbs in the pantry, grease too. She mixed it on the stove, the cayenne making her eyes water. The smell filled the cabin, spicy, medicinal, warming. When it was ready, she held out the tin. He took off his shirt. Clara's breath caught. Scars covered his torso, some surgical, clean lines, others ragged, one near his shoulder, puckered and angry even after years. "Shrapnel," he said. "Gettysburg." She moved behind him, dipped her fingers in the warm liniment. His skin was hot under her touch, muscles rigid. She worked the mixture into the old wound, felt the knots of scar tissue. He never flinched, but his breathing changed deeper, controlled. "Better?" "Yes." He pulled his shirt back on. They went back to their tasks. But something had shifted. The space between them felt charged, like the air before lightning. Dinner was beans and ham, cornbread cooked in the Dutch oven. They ate while the storm raged. The cabin was warm, too warm. Maybe. Clara's cheeks felt flushed, or maybe that was from watching his hands, remembering the heat of his skin. Night fell early, or maybe it had never really been day. The storm was so loud they had to raise voices to be heard. Josita pulled out a wooden box, set it on the table, inside photographs, letters, a medal. "My brothers." He pointed to a tintype, 5 young men, all with his strong jaw. "Dead now. 3 in the war, 2 after, from the lung fever. I'm sorry. Long time ago." He pulled out another photo. "Parents." A stern-faced man, a woman with kind eyes despite the formal pose. Clara could see Josiah in both his father's height, his mother's steady gaze. "Why did you really leave town?" she asked. The darkness and storm made it easier to ask. He was quiet, staring at the photos. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Killed a man." Clara's hands stilled on the sock she was darning. "Self-defense." "Everyone said so, even the judge." He closed the box. "But his widow walked past my store every day. His children couldn't stand their eyes." "What happened?" "He was drunk. Pulled a knife. I took it away." His hands clenched. "Took it away and put it in his chest. Instinct from the war. Didn't mean to. Hands just did it." The wind howled. The fire popped. Clara set down the darning. "You didn't murder him." "No, but he's still dead." They sat in silence. Then Clara heard herself speaking. "I had a fiancé back in Pennsylvania." Josiah looked up. "Thomas, engaged to 2 years. Then his mother found him a girl with money, thin, pretty, good family." Clara's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "He came to break it off, said he was sorry, but I'd understand. A man had to think of his future." "What did you do?" "Packed everything I owned. Took the money I'd saved for our wedding. Bought a train ticket west." She met his eyes. "Left a note saying I'd gone to find a man who could see past the surface." The wind suddenly died. Complete silence. They both looked at the door. "Eye of the storm," Josiah said. 20 minutes, maybe less." He stood, grabbed his coat. "Check the animals. You stay here. I'm coming. Clara, I'm coming." He looked at her, then nodded. Handed her a coat, the one from the bag, thick wool, right size. Outside was another world. Snow to their knees, drifts against the cabin walls, trees bent nearly horizontal, and quiet, so quiet their breathing sounded like shouts. The chickens were alive, huddled together. The cow was chewing cud, calm as Sunday. The mules looked annoyed at the disturbance. They worked fast. More water from the well had to break ice first. More wood from the pile. What they could dig out. Check for damage one shutter loose. Josiah fixed it with quick hammer blows. "Look." Clara turned. The sky had cleared in a perfect circle overhead. Stars brilliant. The Milky Way like spilled sugar. Mountains visible in all directions. White-topped. Magnificent. Her breath caught. Then she saw the wall of black racing toward them from the west. Run! They ran, carrying what they could, made it inside just as the wind hit again, harder than before. The loose shutter, the one Josiah had just fixed, tore away with a shriek of wood. Snow drove through the window. Josiah grabbed a board, tried to hold it in place. Clara found hammer and nails. Together they fought the wind, her holding the board while he hammered. Snow blinded them. Wind tried to tear the board from their hands. Finally, it held. They fell back, breathing hard. Snow was everywhere in their hair, down their necks, covering the floor. Your face, Josiah touched her cheek. His fingers came away bloody. Flying wood, maybe, or ice. She hadn't felt it. He got the medical tin, cleaned the cut with something that burned. His hands were gentle, careful, not deep, won't scar. His thumb lingered on her cheek. Their eyes met. The storm raged around them, but for a moment everything was still. Then Blue whined, breaking the spell. The dog was pawing at the door to Clara's room. She opened it. Water was pooling on the floor, dripping steadily from the ceiling. The new roof, the addition built too quick. It was leaking. The water dripped faster, a steady stream now. Clara grabbed the wash basin, shoved it under the worst leak. The ping of water on metal joined the storm's roar. "Move your things!" Josiah was already pulling her trunk away from the spreading puddle. They worked without speaking, hauling her bed to the dry corner, piling blankets on the chair. Another leak started near the window, then another by the door. Clara ran out of containers, started using cooking pots, her coffee cup, anything that would hold water. Should have hired a proper builder. Josiah's jaw was tight as he watched his work fail. "You built this for someone, for a wife." Clara positioned another pot. "That matters more than perfect corners." He looked at her, snow still melting in his hair. "Sleep in the main room tonight, We'll fix it when the storm passes." They moved her mattress beside the stove, hung a blanket from a rope for privacy. Though it barely divided the space, the storm continued through the night, but the main roof held. Clara lay awake listening to water dripping in her ruined room, to Josiah's breathing on the other side of the blanket, to the wind trying to tear the world apart. By morning, the storm had blown itself out. Weak sunlight filtered through cracks in the shutters. The silence felt wrong after so much noise. Josiah was already up, had pulled down the blanket, folded it precise. He handed her coffee, pointed to the window. "Need to dig out." The door wouldn't open. Snow packed against it solid. They climbed out through a window, sank to their waists in white. The world was transformed, unrecognizable. Drifts reached the roof in places. Trees had fallen, including one massive pine that missed the chicken coop by feet. It took 3 days to dig out proper to patch the roof, to reset life to normal. They worked side by side, speaking only when necessary. But something had changed during the storm. The careful distance between them had shrunk. When their hands touched passing tools, neither pulled away quick anymore. 2 months passed. July burned hot and dry, grass going brown despite the snow melt. Clara learned to milk the cow when she freshened, make butter in the churn Josiah traded for at the mill. Her hands grew calloused in new places. Her shoulders broadened from hauling water, working the garden. August came with thunderstorms that never dropped rain. Lightning struck a tree on the ridge, burned for 2 days before dying out. The air tasted of soak and dust. Clara was alone when they came. Josiah at the mill wouldn't be back until dark. She heard horses before she saw them. 3 men picking their way up the trail. Blue growled from the porch. Clara set down the butter paddle, wiped her hands on her apron. The rifle leaned by the door. She moved it closer. The men stopped in the yard. She recognized one, Mr. Dalton, the shopkeeper Mrs. Whitmore had mentioned. Thin face, thin smile, clothes too fancy for the mountain trail. The other two were younger, hired muscle from their look. "Mrs. Brennan?" Dalton tipped his hat. "We've come to check on your welfare." "I'm well." "Are you?" He dismounted, uninvited. "Living way up here, isolated, with a man you barely know." The other two stayed mounted but spread out slightly, flanking the cabin. Blue's growl deepened. "What do you want? Simply to ensure you're not being held against your will." Dalton stepped closer. "Several concerned citizens in town feel you might have been coerced into this arrangement." "I signed the papers freely." "Of course you did. In front of everyone." His smile showed too many teeth. "But now, with no witnesses." One of the younger men had dismounted, was walking toward the side of the cabin. Toward the spring house where the water rights papers were stored. She'd seen them when organizing. "That's far enough." All three men looked at her. She'd picked up the rifle, held it loose but ready. "Now, Mrs. Brennan, no need for—" "There is need." She worked the lever, chambering around. The sound was loud in the afternoon quiet. "You're trespassing." Dalton's face flushed. "We're trying to help you." "No, you're trying to steal water rights." She'd figured it out the way the hired man was moving. Dalton's false concern. "Josiah owns the headwater of Cedar Creek, worth more than gold in dry years." The mask slipped. Dalton's expression went hard. "You don't understand business, Mrs. Brennan. Your husband's being selfish, holding those rights. The town needs that water. The town can pay fair price or dig their own wells. A woman alone up here." Dalton stepped closer. "Accidents happen. Your husband works at the mill, dangerous place. Logs slip, saws break." Clara raised the rifle to her shoulder, aimed center mass, just like Josiah taught her. Her hands were steady. "You're threatening my husband, simply observing facts." "But if he'd stopped moving forward, you could be a widow tomorrow. Then what you'd need friends in town. People to help you, like you helped the widow Morrison, bought her farm for 10 cents on the dollar when her husband died." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "You've been listening to gossip. I've been listening to truth." The hired man near the spring house took another step. Clara swung the rifle toward him. He froze. "Anyone touches that spring house, I shoot. Simple as that." "You wouldn't dare," Dalton said. "You're just what?" Clara's voice was steady as the rifle. "Fat, ugly, desperate. I've heard it all. Mr. Dalton, doesn't change the fact that I can put a bullet through you at this range." Blue suddenly barked, tail wagging. Clara didn't look, kept the rifle aimed, but she heard it, hoofbeats. Single rider, coming fast. Josiah rode into the yard on one of the mules, must have pushed it hard. He took in the scene, 3 men, Clara with the rifle, Blue bristling and dismounted slow, deliberate. "Gentlemen, Brennan." Dalton tried to recover his authority. "We were just checking on your wife's welfare." "I can see that." Josiah moved to stand beside Clara, not in front, beside. "She seem unwell to you?" "She's pointing a gun at us." "Good. Means I taught her right." He looked at each man in turn. "You're on my land. My wife asked you to leave, yet here you stand. Now to see here." "No." Josiah's voice was quiet, which made it worse somehow. "You see, touch my property, threaten my wife, come near my land again, they won't find your bodies until spring thaw. Mountains big, lots of places to disappear." The hired men were already backing toward their horses. Dalton held his ground a moment longer, face purple with rage or fear. "This isn't over, Brennan." "It is." Josiah pulled his own rifle from the saddle scabbard. "Unless you want to finish it now." Dalton scrambled for his horse. They rode out fast, dust rising behind them. Clara lowered the rifle. Her arms shook now, adrenaline leaving her weak. Josiah took the gun, safetied it, set it aside. Then he turned to her, those gray eyes intense. You held them off? Alone. They wanted the water rights. I know. Sam at the mill heard them planning, rode to warn me. His hand touched her face, the cheek where the storm had cut her. The scar was thin, already fading. You defended our home. Our home. First time he'd said it like that. They threatened you, said accidents happen at the mill. His jaw tightened. Let them try. Then his arms were around her, pulling her against his chest. Not gentle, urgent, fierce. She could feel his heart racing. Or maybe that was hers. Her hands gripped his shirt, held on. They stood like that, pressed together in the dusty yard, while blue circled them, whining with confused joy. When Josiah finally pulled back, his expression was strange, uncertain, almost vulnerable. Clara, She waited, but he didn't finish. Instead, he kissed her forehead, quick and awkward, then stepped away. I'll stay home tomorrow, in case they come back. He busied himself with the mule, not looking at her. Clara touched her forehead where his lips had been, her first kiss from him. Chaste as a church service, but it burned like a brand. That night, she lay on her repaired bed, listening to him move in the main room. The mattress beside the stove had been put away weeks ago, the dividing blanket folded and stored, but the door between their rooms stayed closed at night, always closed. Through the thin wall, she heard him stop at her door, stand there. The handle started to turn, then stopped. His footsteps moved away. Clara stared at the ceiling. 3 months married, still strangers in the ways that mattered. But today he'd called it our home. Today he'd held her like she mattered, like losing her would break something in him. The door handle turned again. This time, it kept turning. The door opened. Josiah stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. The moonlight behind him made his face unreadable. Clara sat up. Quilt pulled to her chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Couldn't sleep? His voice was rough. Keep thinking about today, you with that rifle. He stepped into the room. Not far, just inside the threshold. They'll come back, she said. Maybe. You could sell them the water rights? No. They looked at each other across the dark room. What? The floor between them might as well have been an ocean. Why did you really come in here? Clara asked. His hand tightened on the doorframe. Wood creaked under his grip. Then he stepped back into the main room. Just checking you're all right. The door closed. Soft, final. Clara lay back down. Quilt twisted in her fists. 5 months of this, 5 months of almost, of kindness without warmth, partnership without intimacy, of a closed door between them. October arrived with frost on the windows and elk bugling in the dawn. The aspens on the high ridges turned gold overnight. Like God had painted them while they slept. Clara woke earlier now, her body tuned to the cabin's rhythms. She heard him moving before a first light, the scrape of the stove door, coffee pot settling on the heat. His footsteps, she knew them now, could tell his mood by the weight of his tread. This morning, restless. He'd been restless for weeks. She dressed in the dark, fingers finding buttons by memory, the brown wool dress, patched where she'd torn it on barbed wire. Her hands were different now, rough, capable. She'd helped birth a calf last week, armed deep inside the cow, pulling life into the world. The main room was warm, fire already built high. Josiah stood at the window, coffee cup in hand, watching dawn creep across the valley. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. Another language she'd learned, the grammar of his silence. Clara poured her coffee, added precious sugar. They developed this routine without words. She'd start breakfast while he tended animals. He'd return as the bacon finished. They'd eat standing at the counter, planning the day between bites. But this morning, he didn't move toward the door. "Found something in the old trunk." He set a leather journal on the table. "My sketches." Clara recognized it. She'd seen him drawing some evenings, quick strokes while she read aloud. She hadn't known he saved them. "Look if you want." He left then, grabbing his coat and vanishing into the gray morning. Clara opened the journal. Her face stared back from page after page. Clara kneading bread, flour dusting her forearms. Clara in the garden, dirt on her knees, sun in her hair. Clara reading by lamplight, shooting the rifle, laughing at Blue's antics, sleeping in the chair by the fire, a head tilted, vulnerable. The drawings were rough, but true. He'd caught things she didn't know, showed the way she bit her lip when concentrating, how she tucked loose hair behind her ear. In his sketches, she wasn't fat or plain. She was solid, real, necessary. The latest drawing was dated yesterday. Clara at the washboard, sleeves rolled up, arms strong from months of work. But it was her expression he'd captured, focused, content, at home. She heard him coming back. Closed the journal quick, started breakfast like nothing had changed, but her hands shook cracking eggs. They ate in unusual silence. Even for them, Josiah kept starting to speak, then stopping. Finally, he grabbed his rifle, checking the trap line. He'd be gone hours. Clara waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled out her own hidden work. She'd been using his mother's knitting patterns, found them in the bottom of the same trunk. Baby clothes caps, booties, tiny mittens. Not because she was pregnant, she wasn't, but because Hope needed something to do with its hands. The wool was soft, traded for eggs with a woman at the mill, cream-colored, perfect for boy or girl. She was finishing the last booty when Blue barked. Josiah stood in the doorway, back early, staring at the small pile of knitted things. "You're not—" He stopped, started again. "Are you?" "No." Clara set down the needles. "But maybe, someday, if—" If what? If he ever touched her beyond necessity. If the door between them ever stayed open. He crossed the room in 3 strides, picked up one tiny mitten. His large hand swallowed it completely. "You want children?" Not a question. Clara nodded. "With me." Who else would it be with? He set down the mitten careful, like it might break. Went to the shelf, pulled down a wooden box she hadn't seen before, inside a gold ring. Plain and worn. His mother's had to be. He set it on the table between them. "I need to ask you something." Clara's chest tightened. "Ask, would you stay?" She blinked. "What if I died tomorrow? If the mill accident happened? If you were free?" He met her eyes, and she saw fear there, real fear. "Would you stay here or go back east?" Josiah, truth, Clara. She thought of the life waiting back east, her sister's pity, the whispers, the closed doors, then thought of this morning, waking knowing exactly where she was, who she was, the rifle by the door she could shoot, the garden she'd planted, the cow that came when she called. "I'd stay." "Why?" "Because this is home." He pushed the ring across the table. "Then marry me." "We're already married." "No." He stood, paced to the window, back. "We signed papers. That's all. I want—" He stopped in front of her. "I want to wake up with you, really with you. Want to build cradles for those baby clothes. Want to stop standing at your door at night like a coward
You stand at my door every night. The admission seemed to pain him. Fighting myself. Why, he touched her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Because you deserve better than a broken-down soldier who sees ghosts. Better than isolation and hard work and a man who doesn't know how to be gentle anymore. Clara stood, his hand still on her face. I don't want gentle. His breath caught. I want real. Want a partner who sees me as I am. She covered his hand with hers.
You picked me when everyone else saw a mistake, but you haven't really chosen me. Not all the way. Clara, you keep me at distance, like you're waiting for me to disappoint you, or leave, or... He kissed her, not the forehead this time, her mouth, hard and desperate and clumsy. His beard scratched, their noses bumped. He pulled back, started to apologize. Clara grabbed his shirt, pulled him back down, this time softer, finding the rhythm. His arms came around her, lifting her against him. She could taste coffee and something uniquely him, feel the hunger he'd been hiding for months. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me. Really stay. Instead of answering, Clara picked up the ring, old gold, worn smooth by years of work. She slid it onto her finger. Perfect fit. Your mother had large hands, strong hands. Like yours. He pulled her close again. She would have loved you. They stood, holding each other, while October lights slanted through the window. Blue whined and pushed between them, demanding attention. They laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. That night, after dinner, after the evening chores, they sat by the fire, but not in separate chairs. Clara had pulled hers next to his. Close enough, their shoulders touched. She was knitting a scarf now, something practical. He was oiling his rifle. We should go to town, he said suddenly. Do this proper church wedding. I don't need that. You deserve it. Clara set down the knitting. What I deserve and what I want aren't the same thing. He looked at her, firelight catching the gold flecks in his gray eyes. What do you want? This. She gestured at the cabin, at Blue, at him. Just this, but all of it. Not the careful half-marriage we've been doing. He set aside the rifle, took her hands. Work rough meeting, work rough. Clara Brennan. Her married name still sounded new on his lips. Will you share my bed? Heat flooded her face, but she didn't look away. Yes. He stood, pulling her up with him, led her not to her room with its repaired roof and single bed, but to his, their room now. The bed was bigger than she'd realized, wide enough for two. I should tell you, he said, sudden shyness in his voice. It's been a long time. Since before the war, I might not. Clara silenced him with a kiss. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark. We have time to learn. He started unbuttoning her dress. His fingers trembled slightly. She'd never seen his hands shake before. Not when facing down wolves or threats or storms. Clara? Just her name, but weighted with months of want. She helped him with the buttons, let the dress fall, stood before him in her shift and stays, solid and real and unashamed, his hands spread across her waist, warm through the thin fabric. You're sure, Josiah? She reached for his shirt buttons. I've been sure since you walked past 9 perfect women and chose me. He caught her hands, stilled them. You don't understand. Then tell me. I didn't choose you because you were what was left. His voice was fierce, urgent. I chose you because when I walked in that room, you were the only one who looked like she could survive, like you already had survived. The others were pretty pictures. You were real." Clara's throat closed. She touched his face, felt the beard soft under her palm. "Show me." He did, later, much later. They lay tangled in the quilts while the fire died to embers. Clara's head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, slow. His fingers combed through her hair, unpinned and wild. "The baby clothes," he said into the darkness. "How long have you been making them?" 2 months. "Why?" She traced a scar across his ribs, felt him shiver. "Because I believe in preparing for hope." His arms tightened around her. "Hope? Is that foolish?" "No." He kissed the top of her head. "It's the bravest thing I've ever heard." Blue scratched at the door, whining to go out. Josiah sighed, started to rise. Clara pulled him back. "Leave him. He needs—" A howl split the night. Not Blue, not Wolf, something else. Human. A woman, screaming. Josiah was out of bed before the scream died, pulling on pants, grabbing the rifle. Clara fumbled for her dress in the dark, hands clumsy with urgency. Blue was scratching at the door, growling low and constant. Another scream. Closer. "Stay here!" Josiah was already at the door. "No." He looked back at her, barely visible in the dying firelight. She had her dress, half buttoned, was reaching for the other rifle. "Clara, we do this together." He nodded, opened the door careful. Blue shot out, vanished into the dark. They followed, Clara barefoot on the cold ground. The moon was new, darkness absolute beyond the cabin. A shape stumbled into the yard, small, dragging something, a carpet bag. The figure collapsed to its knees. "Please, please, help me!" Clara recognized the voice. Miss Pemberton, no, Mrs. Dalton now. The blonde with dimples who'd married the shopkeeper. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, hair hanging loose and wild. They got her inside, Clara supporting her while Josiah barred the door. In the lamplight, they could see the damage. Bruised cheek, split lip, fingernail marks on her throat. He said I was his property. Mrs. Dalton Emma. Clara remembered was shaking hard. Said he paid for me fair and square when I tried to leave. Clara heated water, found clean cloth. Josiah stood guard at the window, rifle ready. Blue paced between them, hackles still raised. "He'll come for me." Emma grabbed Clara's hand. "He said he'd kill anyone who helped me." "Let him try." Josiah's voice was flat. Clara cleaned the wounds while Emma talked. The marriage had gone bad within weeks. Dalton was different and private controlling, mean. 2 other brides had already fled their husbands, taken the train back east in the night. "But I don't have money for a ticket. Don't have anywhere to go." Emma looked at Clara. "I remembered how you stood up to him with the rifle. Thought maybe you can stay tonight." Clara wrapped a blanket around the woman's shoulders. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." But morning was still hours away when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. 3 riders. Dalton's voice rang out. "Brennan, I know she's there. Send out my wife." Joseph opened the door, stood backlit by the fire, rifle casual in his hands. "Woman came, seeking help. She stays until she chooses to leave. She's my legal wife, and Clara's mine. Didn't stop you threatening her." Dalton dismounted, even in the dark. Clara could see his rage and how he moved. "You're harboring a runaway wife. I'll have the law on you." "What law?" Josiah stepped onto the porch. "Sheriff's 2 days away. By the time you fetch him, she'll be gone." "Where you gonna hide her?" "No need to hide." Clara appeared beside Josiah, her rifle aimed at Dalton's chest. "Mrs. Mills at the boarding house needs help. Pays fair wages. Coach to Denver runs twice weekly. From there, Trains go everywhere. Emma appeared in the doorway, chin lifted despite her swollen face. I'm not going back. You're my wife. I was your purchase. Emma's voice was steady. But I'm done being owned. Dalton took a step forward. 3 rifle hammers clicked, Josiah's, Clara's, and Emma's. She'd found the 3rd rifle, held it awkward, but determined. You wouldn't dare. 3 witnesses say you attacked us. Josiah's voice was conversational. Dark night. You threatened my wife before? Who's to say what happened? The hired men were already backing their horses away. They knew that tone, the danger in it. Dalton stood frozen, calculating. Then he spat in the dirt. This isn't over. Yes, Clara said. It is. They waited until the hoofbeats faded. Then Emma collapsed, rifle clattering to the floor. Clara caught her, held her while she sobbed great, gulping sobs of relief and terror and freedom. They put her in Clara's old room. At dawn, Josiah hitched the wagon strap. They drove Emma to town, straight to Mrs. Mills's boarding house. The older woman took one look at Emma's face and opened her arms. You're safe here, child. While Josiah loaded supplies, Clara walked Emma to the bank, withdrew her egg money, 6 months of saving, for the ticket. Emma's eyes filled. I can't. You can't. You will. Clara pressed the money into her hands. Go somewhere new. Start over. Live. 2 days later, they heard Emma had taken the morning coach. Dalton raged and threatened, but what could he do? His wife had left. It happened. Even the law wouldn't force her back. November arrived with snow on the peaks and frost every morning. The traveling preacher sent word he'd be through before Thanksgiving. Josiah mentioned it casual over breakfast. Could do the ceremony, if you want. Clara looked at the gold ring on her finger. His mother's ring. Then at him, this man who'd stood armed beside her in the dark. Yes. The preacher arrived on a Tuesday, tired and dusty from the circuit. They fed him elk stew and cornbread while he told news from other settlements. Then he stood in their main room on Bible in hand. Witnesses. Josiah looked out the window at the mules. They'll do. The preacher blinked, then shrugged. Mountain weddings had their own rules. Clara wore her mother's cameo pinned to the brown wool dress. Josiah had trimmed his beard, put on his cleanest shirt. Blue sat between them, tail thumping the floor. The words were simple, old. They'd already been living them for months. But when the preacher said, You may kiss the bride, Josiah cupped her face gentle, kissed her like they had all the time in the world. Sign here. The preacher held out the certificate. They signed. He signed. Then he looked at the mules through the window and laughed. First time I've had livestock as witnesses. But legal's legal. After he left, they stood in the yard watching his wagon disappear down the trail, Josiah's arm around Clara's waist, her head against his shoulder. Should go to town, he said. Announce it proper. Yes. They went the next day. The general store was busy Saturday morning, everyone stocking up. Conversation stopped when they entered. Clara felt the eyes, the whispers, starting. Then she straightened, walked to the counter with Josiah beside her. Mrs. Brennan, the clerk's voice carried. What can I get you? The usual order. Clara pulled out her list, written neat, plus extra flour. I'm baking for the church social. She felt the shift in the room. The wives of the 9-7 now watching her. She wore work clothes, practical boots. Her hands were rough, nails short, but she moved through the store like she belonged there. Josiah. One of the husbands nodded. Heard you helped Emma Dalton get to safety. She helped herself, Josiah said. We just didn't stop her. The man looked at Clara with something new in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Takes courage. Mrs. Whitmore appeared, nervous as a sparrow. "Mrs. Brennan, I wanted to— that is, I should have—" She stopped, started again. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." Clara studied the woman, saw the genuine regret. "We all make mistakes, and—" The Mrs. Whitmore glanced at the remaining brides, shopping with their husbands. Two more had the hollow look Emma had worn. Some mistakes are bigger than others. As they loaded the wagon, men tipped their hats to Clara, not mockingly, real acknowledgment. The woman who'd faced down threats, harbored a runaway, made a life in the mountains. "Look," Josiah pointed. Across the street, one of the original 9 was arguing with her husband. As they watched, she walked away from him, toward the boarding house, the third to leave. "Should we?" "No." Clara climbed onto the wagon seat. "She has to save herself first. Then we can help." They drove home through the November afternoon, wagon loaded with winter supplies. The cabin appeared through the trees, smoke rising straight in the still air. Home. That evening, they sat by the fire. Clara read from his mother's cookbook, planning Thanksgiving dinner. Josiah whittled small spoons, perfect for tiny hands. "Spring," he said suddenly. Clara looked up. "What?" "The baby clothes. They might be needed by spring." Heat rose in her cheeks. It was possible her monthly was late, but she hadn't wanted to hope too soon. "Maybe—" He set down the spoon, pulled her from her chair onto his lap. She curled against him, feeling his heart beat through his shirt. "No regret?" he asked into her hair. Clara thought of the woman she'd been 6 months ago, standing at the end of the line, unwanted, unnecessary. Now her hands could birth calves, shoot rifles, make butter, defend what was hers. She was needed, essential, loved, though he'd never said the word. "Only one?" He tensed. "What?" "That it took so long to find you." His arms tightened around her. Outside, the snow began to fall, the first real snow of winter, soft and silent. It would cover the ugly places, make everything clean and new. By morning, the world would be transformed, but inside, they were warm, they were home, they were whole. Blue lifted his head, ears forward, not alarmed, interested. They heard it then. Hoofbeats. Single rider, moving slow. Josiah reached for the rifle, but Clara stopped him. "Listen." The rider was singing, slightly, but with enthusiasm. The traveling preacher, they realized, heading to his next settlement. His voice faded into the distance, leaving them with the quiet of snowfall and fire. Clara stood, held out her hand. "Come to bed." He took her hand, followed her to their room, their bed, their life, built from choosing each other when the world said they were wrong, built from work and trust and the courage to stay. Through the window, snow erased the trail, the footprints, all evidence of the path that brought them here. But it didn't matter. They weren't going back. They were home, 6 months later. Clara stood in the church social hall, her preserve jars lined up for the harvest competition. Her belly showed beneath her apron, spring's promise made visible. 3 more of the original mail-order brides had left their husbands, but 2 had found real partnerships with other men, men who saw them as partners, not property. Mrs. Mills approached with a letter from Denver, Emma's handwriting, inside. A photograph of her standing before a schoolhouse. Children gathered around. "Teaching now," the letter said. "Free?" Josiah's hand settled on Clara's shoulder. Around them, the town continued its gossip, its judgment, but something had shifted. The woman they'd dismissed as a mistake had become the one others turned to for strength. Not because she'd grown beautiful, because she'd grown necessary. That night, lying beside Josiah with his hand on her growing belly, Clara understood love wasn't about being chosen from a line of prettier faces. It was about being seen, truly seen, and still being wanted, not despite who you were. Because of it, this story, inspired by historical accounts of mail-order brides in the American frontier, was created solely for entertainment purposes. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence, discrimination, or harmful behavior. All characters and events are fictional products of creative imagination. Any resemblance to real people, living or deceased, or actual events, is purely coincidental. The story aims to explore themes of human resilience, dignity, and connection while acknowledging the historical complexities of the era it depicts.